Hi, Fiona here and welcome to Innovivid, the project that loves nothing better than sharing a cup of tea and a chat. Our theme is how to live. And first up, we have a question for you. Would you break the law for a loved one?
I guess it all depends on the law. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the easy way out, isn't it? So it's all relative.
It is relative, yeah.
What do you think? Would you break a law to save a loved one?
It all depends on the law. But I probably would. But it depends on the situation of what the loved one's in.
So let's say...
I might say no because they might need to learn a lesson.
Well, let's say you are stealing a loaf of bread because your family's starving.
I have done that.
Okay.
Yeah, when I was on the streets as a kid, I stole bread to feed me and my friends that were on the street. You don't even think about it stealing. All you can think about is wanting to eat.
Yeah.
So it's always, context is always important in everything.
What if it's not a loved one? What if it's someone you don't like?
Again, I'll go back to my street days. We would care for each other even though I didn't know them. So you're all in the same boat. You're going to do things that you probably wouldn't do normally, but if you're hungry and desperate, you're going to break laws in order to survive. In Toowoomba, where I'm helping the homeless and hearing their stories and what they're doing, they're breaking the law by camping in places which they shouldn't. I had the people come in who I know the police are looking for, but do I call the police and say, oh, wait, Joe's here? No. I am providing a meal for them and letting them then make that choice of whether to go and see the police or not.
Wow, looks like context is everything, especially when love and survival are at stake. But let's get some other ideas too. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. Our Innovivid team came together to explore the big question for this ep.
What is right and what is wrong? Are they just things that we decide? And if so, who?
Wow, that's a huge question. What is right and what is wrong? In my household, I am right. Unfortunately, I have to leave my house and my household and go out into a wider world where I am not always right. Right and wrong is very difficult, and it's also fluid. I don't think it's a hard and fast rule, because what is right for some is not right for others. And how we reach those places of right and wrong, we all come to those places from different starting points, and that impacts how we arrive at what we feel is right and wrong. So I don't think there is one short, snappy answer as to what is right and what is wrong and who decides that, because it's much more fluid than that.
I think that question comes down to everybody's personal view of morality and what morality means to them. I think that everybody's going to have a different definition to this question, but also a different way of interpreting the world and viewing the world and what morality means to them. So, big question. I think everybody is going to have a different definition.
Oh, if only life were that easy. I don't think life is that black and white though. I think life is more like 1,000 shades of grey. And I think there might be different shades of dark grey and different shades of light grey. And sometimes the greys can merge and move. And I think it can be really hard to tell what's right and what's wrong, particularly in the heat of the moment. Might be slightly easier with hindsight, but by then it's often too late. So I don't think there is one answer to all of that. I think it's a case of thinking, discerning, considering, and trying, and being prepared to be wrong.
That's a tough question. What's right and what's wrong? I probably don't tend to think in those categories. I think more about what's helpful and unhelpful, or what's useful and not useful, not in a horrible utilitarian way, but just what works. I think we get hung up on right and wrong and assume that there's some universal standard, and if we just all work to that, everything will be fine. But that's not how humans are. Life is complex. Life is really challenging. And sometimes things are a good idea, but sometimes they're not. And it's not the same all the time. So what's helpful in this situation, or what doesn't help, I think is a more useful guide for me than what's right or wrong. Maybe there are some things that people have learned collectively don't work. But is that right or wrong? I don't know.
It depends on what the question is and who the person you are asking, because all of us are so different. What is right with me is not right with you or with other person. And so the only right thing is when we come together and then I let go of my own part and you let go of your own part, or John or Elizabeth let go of her own part so that we come together. So the right thing, and this is from me, is that if we look at one another as you are and treat them as you wish them to treat you, I think this is the best right thing we could ever do.
I think rules are important because they help us stay safe. You know, at an individual level, I think if we go for traffic, we know it's common sense not to drive without wearing a seatbelt, because it's going to end badly if you have an accident. You're not wearing a seatbelt. There is something within human society, though, maybe it's just Australia, that unless there's a fine involved, people will ignore that. So if there's a financial penalty, I will keep using my seatbelt, will keep looking at my phone when I'm driving, etc., even though we'd suggest otherwise. But there are other rules, and every society has had to have some rules. And there are some basics, you know, going back to that understanding of respecting others. Don't kill is not a bad rule, you know. But what about self-defense? What about when they come into your patch to your family? When is killing right? It becomes a little bit interesting in that kind of way. But rules are important. I think for me, when the person I particularly love, who's called Jesus, lived 2,000 years ago, when he was challenged by a lawyer, he said, well, really, love God and love your neighbour as you love yourself. Love something beyond yourself, which I understand gives life to the planet and to the universe, and love your neighbour, short way of saying everybody, as you love yourself.
Hey, I've heard that somewhere before. It's true that us humans have been trying to work all this out for millennia, and there are major traditions that continue to influence our thinking about this stuff. That so-called golden rule, it's probably kind of foundational in Western cultures and elsewhere, but it's actually found in nearly all world religions, with just minor variations in wording. Probably foundational, maybe not so much these days. What do you reckon, John?
So I think for lots of people, the stories of faith are where they find a sense of right and wrong. Stories that actually show what love looks like in different situations and places. If I can give one example from Christianity, the parable of the Good Samaritan, a story that Jesus told, shows the Samaritan, a person who's not very valued in society, caring for a stranger. And in a way, that's actually informed our society about how we are to care for strangers or refugees or even someone, you know, the injured person in a road. The question also says, are these just things that we assign right and wrong? To some degree, that's true. And if you look through history, there are things that were wrong in the past that are not wrong now. I kind of think that's actually more to do with discovery than it is to do with invention, if that makes sense. That we're discovering a deeper sense of what is right and wrong, rather than inventing right and wrong.
Right and wrong. Yeah, I think largely we actually do decide what is right and what is wrong, and it is a part of the corporate experiment of building community and society. So over the years, things that we once thought were wrong now are acceptable, and things that were acceptable are now wrong. And so we have to work that out together. And one of the ways in which I think we get that project wrong is sometimes we concretise rules rather than trying to work out whether something is actually helpful or not. And so who gets to decide? Well, it depends on your system. In a democracy, the majority gets to decide. In other systems, there are rule makers. We have religious authorities who make rules, but even those change over time. So I think it's actually a project that's in flux. And who gets to decide? That depends on your system.
I don't think right and wrong are objective things that are just out there or are part of the objective structure of things. I think right and wrong are decided by human beings. And they're things that we decide collectively on the basis of what kind of societies and what kind of cultures and what kind of communities that we want to have. How do we want to live together? What kind of life do we want to sustain together? And on the basis of that, we create senses of right and wrong, and we usually enshrine a significant amount of these or encode them in laws. Now, across human cultures, you can discover significant similarities in how various groups of human beings have decided on what is right and what is wrong. Most human cultures have some sense that murdering another human being, for instance, is wrong. There's significant similarities, but again, even then, I wouldn't say that points to some objective right and wrong that exist out there. I think it points to the fact that human beings collectively have decided on similar things about what is right and what is wrong. But there's also significant differences between different cultures, and there's no simple or obvious way about how to adjudicate about who's right and wrong, or who's wrong about who's right and wrong. And that means that there will inevitably be conflict and antagonism in human communities. And I think part of our systems of right and wrong need to actually create space for that conflict and antagonism precisely about what is right and what is wrong.
I think we have an inherent moral compass that allows us to recognize what is right and what is wrong. If I were to stand up now, come over and thump you, I would know intrinsically, just in my DNA, that that's not a right thing to do. That's not a kind thing to do. It's actually quite a mean thing to do. So that's what holds you back from doing it. But I think, in the main, humans do understand the difference between right and wrong just by virtue of having some sort of moral compass. Sadly, not everyone's moral compass points north, and that's the times when you get all sorts of, conflicts and what have you. So I think basically we actually understand it ourselves without having to have a list of instructions telling us. I mean, they might help, but I don't think they're the be-all and end-all.
I mean, I do think they are things that we decide. A lot of ideas about what's right and wrong have come from the accumulated years of societies, and people living together. But I think it's a thing we always have to be asking ourselves, has this changed? Well, there's some things that we may say are never going to change. It's never good to murder, it's never good to steal from people. But there's certainly things that cultures might have said, this is wrong, but we're in a different place now, and so we need to reevaluate if this is still helpful or unhelpful for our community and for our people.
What I heard there is that what's right and what's wrong are often really decided by people in community. It's like we're all sailing along in the same boat and we need some guidelines to make sure that no one tips it over. It all depends on the needs of people, and at the core, we have that niggling desire to be in it together. Oh, and I do need to note that it's often people tugging at the edges of that boat that actually move it to new places when old ideas need to give way to new ideas. Maybe you're one of those people helping that to happen. Anyway, context is crucial to deciding what is socially acceptable, and I heard too that it's worth revisiting common ideas of right and wrong in order to check if they're all still useful. A couple of people mentioned how religion has influenced various societies' collective moralities over time. Is that still happening? Is it a good idea? Sometimes? Maybe? This points us to the next episode, where we ask all about religion and rules, what the point is, and whether they are more than just a list of do's and don'ts. And even if we're religious or not, or whatever, are these ideas worth considering? Maybe see you there. What do you think?